Go Long by Hazel Witch, read by Kaiinbed. A warning that the characters in this fic are 17 and that there will be consensual explicit content. Continuation of Chapter 2. Deku. Izuku looked quickly over his shoulder from where he crouched on the music room floor, sneakers squeaking against the slippery floorboards. Katsuki stood in the doorway, fingertips gripping the frame above his head, illuminated from the back with the divine aura of fluorescent corridor light. What are you still doing here? Izuku gestured to the pile of instrument cases, stacked haphazardly in some kind of precarious marching band Jenga. I leave my trumpet here sometimes. He swallowed heavily as his eyes traversed the high school idleness in his presence. So I don't have to carry it home after the game. Katsuki's lips quirked in quiet amusement, swinging himself forward, entering the room. He was still wearing his football uniform, sans shoulder pads, a smear of black face paint daubed on each cheek, fair hair darkened by sweat and pushed back from his face. Eyes skimming the post-game mess left by the band, he trailed a hand against the wall as he approached, Izuku hurriedly pushing himself to his feet and dusting down his knees. Katsuki traced the edge of the room like some kind of predator, a shark making lazy circles around his defenseless prey, playing with its meal. And, what are you doing here? Izuku asked in return, watching as the star quarterback inspected the display on the wall, drawing closer with every deliberate step. White pants. Why did UA insist on kitting its football team out in white pants? They were so tight and so thin and really so immodest. It was impossible not to get an eyeful of the rather impressive bulge that lay beneath them. Just keeping track of my new neighbor, Katsuki replied, and Izuku realized it was the most he'd ever heard him speak. His voice was slow, intentional, ever so slightly demeaning. Sexy as fuck. You think I haven't seen you ogling me, Deku? Izuku froze, realizing his eyes had lingered far too long on Katsuki's crotch. Fuck. He was a dead man. No, I haven't. But Katsuki only sneered as Izuku backed away and crossed his arms awkwardly across his chest, eyes dropping to the floor. His mouth was chalk dust dry, and he was trying his very best not to let his legs shake, all while struggling to work out if he should prepare himself for the beating of his life. Or something else entirely. Is there supposed to be an excuse between all that stuttering, little nerd? Katsuki was feet away from Izuku now, broad and gorgeous and tall, too. He had to be at least 6 foot, if not more. Dangerous. Swallowing heavily again, Izuku snuck a look towards the exit, wondering if he could dive to the side and make a bolting escape. After Katsuki's display of sporting prowess earlier in the night, it was a pretty laughable thought. You know, Katsuki continued, there ain't nothing wrong with looking once in a while. Izuku's heart skipped a beat, or 3. What are you... He took another step back, this time the crook of his knees bumping against the discarded chair. Katsuki was so unbearably close, the heat of his body racketing off him in waves, the sweat glistened tan on his skin still lingering long after summer had faded. Izuku was trapped, could do nothing but stare with wide, disbelieving eyes as Katsuki Bakugo finally halted, scratching errantly at his chest before sliding a hand over his jersey, drifting lower until it finally settled on his crotch. Izuku's gaze trailed in his wake, only widening further when he noted the unmistakable hardness in the tight white pants. Watching Izuku closely, Katsuki smirked and squeezed. Jesus fucking Christ. Maybe today's your lucky day. Izuku had outright lost the power of speech, every inch of his body going up in flames as his mouth worked open and closed in useless, wordless gulps. He couldn't tear his eyes away from Katsuki's hand. What? He eventually managed, embarrassingly breathless. Shh, Katsuki tittered, now looming over him, tone about as smoky as a finely milled cigar. Stop with the words, nerd. You can put that pretty mouth of yours to much better use. Right up in his face, Katsuki reached out his free hand and gripped Izuku's chin between forefinger and thumb. That's something you want to try? Dumbfounded by the turn of events and still utterly mute, Izuku only nodded beseechingly. Good. With the single word, Katsuki drew back, dropping his hand from Izuku's chin while the other continued to work over his growing bulge. Then why don't you get back down on those knees for me, huh? It was like some kind of siren's call, a spell that Izuku fell under the instant the words left Katsuki's mouth, forgetting all previous anxieties about meeting a brutal end before his 18th birthday. He found himself sinking to his knees in front of the most attractive boy he'd ever laid eyes upon. That's it, Katsuki murmured, and Izuku's stomach fluttered with a potent mixture of nerves and desire. Once he settled back onto his thighs, face to face with that generous bulge, he felt so lightheaded there was a very real possibility he'd pass out before they could go any further. He glanced up, only to find Katsuki's perfect angular face looking down at him expectantly. Never one to willingly fall short of expectation, Izuku took a steadying breath and brushed a tentative palm across what was undeniably Katsuki's rock-hard dick. He was rewarded with a hiss and an intake of breath as Katsuki rocked into the touch. Fuck yeah, Deku. Oh god. Izuku applied more pressure with his palm, tracing the outline of Katsuki's cock beneath the sinfully thin pants. Every movement urged on by Katsuki's rumbling approval. Izuku's own dick twitched painfully in the constraint of his jeans, more turned on than he'd ever been in his entire sad life. A tiny wet patch began to form in the fabric over Katsuki's thigh as Izuku worked his hand over his dick in careful strokes. Every time he glanced up, he found Katsuki looking down at him, lips parted softly in a groan, rusty brown eyes gleaming with a reddish hue. Those eyes were like a house fire catching a blaze, eviscerating Izuku's thoughts with a single look, every worry going up in flame, each setting the next one alight until they were all burning to the ground. There was no space left for anything but the need to please. You're fucking good at that, Katsuki muttered under his breath, sliding fingers up Izuku's forehead and pushing them through his hair. You want to do more? The answer, of course, was a resounding whispered, yes. Katsuki chuckled, shoulders tensing and rising in time with each stroke of Izuku's hand, breath stuttering and faltering in his chest. That can be arranged, he said, releasing his hold on Izuku's curls and reaching up to tug his jersey over his head, exposing a set of athletic washboard abs. Soft fine hair prickled into goosebumps across taut skin. A subtle trail of blonde running downward in a line below his navel. This close, he smelled of sweat and masculine exertion, and something else musky that made Izuku's mouth pool with saliva. Giving Izuku one final incendiary look, Katsuki dug his thumbs beneath the waistband of his pants, drawing them down slowly so that his cock could spring free. Izuku came, hard, all over his hand and stomach and, surprisingly, his chest. He lay there panting, hard cock still in hand, unclenching his eyes to look up at the ceiling of his bedroom. This was probably a new low, a jerk-off fantasy so cliché it put the most low-budget porns to shame. Sighing heavily, he reached over to his bedside table for a tissue. Yeah, scheduled a freaking exorcism. He was cursed, all right.